Well, hi there, it's Paulie here with Mr. Snoots. Hey! And I have a real treat. This is a game that I kick-started and I waited for with much joy because I could see their work in progress. The Monty Python role-playing game. Monty Python's Curricular Medieval Reenactment program. No, it isn't. Now, the thing that impressed me about this is that it could have just been literally a rort. Monty Python is funny, it's full of lots of crazy material. This could have just been a very ordinary game that slung a few Monty Pythonisms, chucked in a couple of, Monty Python monsters. There's the Dread Black Beast of Varg, there's the Carnivorous Bunny Kherbanog, and you got a game. But that's not what these guys did. Monty Python was subversive comedy, and in many ways this is a subversive game because it plays with the role-playing game tropes and environments in such a way that it makes an absolutely unique game. It is a truly excellent piece of game design. So, for those of you who aren't aware, and bafflingly I found there are people who aren't, so Monty Python's Flying Circus was a British television comedy from the very early 70s. I think the first one was 1969, in fact. It ran for 4 seasons, and it just turned British comedy on its head. It came from the distinguished absurdism line of comedies from The Goons, Tony Hancock in his way, Marty Feldman's Comedy Machine, and there's Monty Python. Now, Monty Python went on, did movies, Monty Python's Life of Brian, Monty Python the Holy Grail, Monty Python's Meaning of Life, and some wonderful record albums which were hysterically funny, and a number of books. What is interesting is that these guys have gone through all of that for their material here. Monty Python's something I just know all of it, chapter and verse. I grew up on it, I love it. In later life, here's my name drop, I wrote for Eric Idle because I did the Discworld games for Terry Pratchett, and Eric Idle was my voice actor, so I got to sit down with him a lot and read parts opposite him. So yes, my Monty Python journey has been fun. What they did with this is beautiful. So first off, as you can see, the thing is just, it's absolutely alive with art. Now what they've done is they've based this on Monty Python and the Holy Grail in order to essentially parody the great medieval role-playing game. And I am going to say, and talking to you now as someone that is actually on Team Pendragon for Chaosium, this is a brilliant piss take of the game Pendragon. Not specifically intended as a foil to that game, but it is set in Arthurian Britain, and you can see there's some definite little wrenches being thrown into cogs and quips here and there, but essentially this is like the anti anti Chaosium game. Not at all silly. Now, one thing to say at the start is it's not a game in which the player characters are supposed to just be silly and stupid. They point out that when you watch a Monty Python sketch, if you watch like Monty Python and the Holy Grail, the protagonists in the sketch always consider themselves to be entirely serious. They are straight men. They are people who are doing what seems perfectly sensible to them at the time, even if it's in an absurd world. So it will always be played straight, and so they say, don't go out of your way to have characters do silly things or say silly things. The logic of the game will create these situations around you as you play characters that are trying to soldier forward and see themselves as being perfectly sensible. So, if you are asked to provide a shrubbery for the Knights of Nit, well, you've come there, you've asked, what must we do to pass? The fact that you've been given a ridiculous task, it isn't something that you've created by, being net. So what they have done is made a game system that is powered rather beautifully by a crazy collection of dice. Now, this is one of those games that has not just the usual D&D style role-playing dice. You know, the D4s, 6s, 8s, 10s, 12s that we've come to love. Here is our wonderful dice box. I love it, I love it, I love it. The dreadback beast of... But, when you open this up, whoops, we have our dice, all in their strange little... Hang on. We have our dice, all in their strange little containy places. So, we've got D4s, D6s, D8s, 4s, 6s, 8s, 10s, 12s, 14s, 16s, 18s and 20s. Now, DCC did this in their game, and I found the dice sets that were coming out, the dice weren't differently coloured, and it was very hard to figure out which were which. This game has made its dice in different colours and in a storage box, so it's actually easy to see which is which, and they are recorded in those colours in the game, so it's not as puzzling as, say, DCC to figure out. Now, what's rather charming on these two is the ones on many of them are a foot squishing you, except you will also find there is a dice, a large one, which can be used for tracking physical damage on characters. So it's got getting better, fine, not dead yet, but the parrot that says no more. There is likewise a large dice here, which is for tracking mental state of characters, because you can take both physical and mental damage, basically turning into a loony. And this has different things from doing fine, Reginald Maudling, to completely coconuts, and what's the end one? Daft crackers. What do we got? Sensible. Yes, I think turning completely coconuts is your final thing there. So anyway, this is this wonderful dice box that came with the Kickstarter, but yeah, obviously it can be bought. There are a couple of other cool props. The Games Master in this is called Hole, Head of Light Entertainment. We'll get into that in a minute. You have this amazing sash to wear to show everyone that you are the Hole. There's tokens which are used in the game. So we've got tokens for merit, and we've got tokens for demerit, and a bag for sort of storing it in. And for reasons best known unto themselves, we also have plastic coconuts. Completely unnecessary, but good fun nonetheless. This is part of the blessings and curse of Kickstarters. You have to come up with silly props and additions. But this game, so we've got this array of different dice. Now you have character traits when you're creating a character. Those traits are all expressed as a dice. Now your traits, your characteristics, can be at the silly end, which is the small dice, D4, or go up to the completely sensible end, which is the D20. And these will actually change during play. Your abilities will go up and down. But as you design a character, you have traits that you place on the character. You decide upon an archetype, and there are a great many here that you can choose from. They've got, what have they got here? Where's our archetypes? Obviously they've got knights, they've got monarchs, they've got nuns. There we go. A lot of the artwork all through this, by the way, is taken from that kind of medieval manuscript style. You know those ones where medieval knights are for some reason bafflingly fighting armed rabbits or snails? Yes, they play on this a lot, which was of course where Gilliam got a lot of his artwork for their animations. But you can have knaves, there are minstrels, eremite, hermit, enchanters, which include things like druids as well as sort of magicians, clerics of various kinds, which includes like nuns, churls, which is like, you know, just a peasant, etc. There are a great many of these. Now, each of these, you pick traits for the character, and it gives you a budget, and you can set a number of traits at different dice values to start off with. But each of those archetypes has a trait that it ignores. It is blind to that trait. It can never be attacked or assaulted with that trait, nor can it use it. So if you have someone that ignores a trait that is, well, actually, what have we got as traits? So we've got animal husbandry, argumentation, authority, bardistry, chastity, decorum, druidry, glibness, heartiness, lawfulness, as in law, L-O-R-E, luck, nimbleness, purpose, sorcery, strategy, subtlety, valour, and wisdom in the ways of science. And each of these are rather like they've got the upper and lower limits have their own kind of little words for them. So, you know, you might have chastity goes from chaste to naughty. You'll get lawfulness goes from lawful to outright Gumby. Nimbleness, nimble to Mrs. Two Lumps. Strategy, strategic to Makamikaze Highlander. So, yeah, so if you have someone, for instance, that is completely blind to authority, no authoritarian argument, or, you know, I am your king, make way, it's not going to work. You know, we are an anarcho-syndicalist commune. They are immune to it. They can't use it, but also they're not affected by it. If someone is immune to sorcery, if they ignore it, magic doesn't work on them, nor do they receive its benefits, but nor sometimes do they even perceive it. If you remember, like the Christian monk in Eric the Viking, I quite liked him, where he just couldn't see magical stuff around him and just considered everyone else as completely coconuts. But, so, now, you can also have secondary characters with you. You can have minions with you. Now, if you, some of these characters must have an NPC that goes with them, an NPC minion. So, for instance, the knights must have a valet. Monarchs must have a valet. There are others that you can choose to take, and there's a big list of these. There's minstrels, there's holy sages, you can have nuns, you can have cooks, you can have churls with you, you can have bodyguards, you can have all sorts of things. Now, each of these goes into a slot on the character sheet. Now, the character sheet, there in the back, it's got spaces in there, but if you take NPCs, they fill up some of these spaces. So you will have less personal traits if you take more minions with your character. But here's the thing, not only do they have their own way of handling things, their own traits, but if you take any sort of damage, physical or mental, during the game, you can sacrifice an accoutrement, a piece of equipment, or you can sacrifice a minion, and you can sacrifice your minions for other things as well. So a character that has some minions with them is longer lived. You have the ability to throw these people to the wolves in order to survive. That's it, you're crossing the wilderness, you're forced to eat your own minstrels. Or, you know, message for you, sir. So there's a lot of flexibility. Now, each of those traits in the rules has a lovely pair of pages in it, which has pictures of different accoutrements that go with it and a random chart for rolling these accoutrements and what they do. So there are accoutrements that go, in this case, with argumentation, which are things like gavels and Socratic togas and barrister guards and heaps of historical records, sheafs of contracts and forms, portable lecterns, rough drafts of the Magna Carta, etc. And they give you pluses on the use of different traits and roles. You can roll, by the way, on anything that you haven't taken as a trait, you just roll minimum dice. Now, when you're doing a trait roll, what you do is you roll whatever silly dice that you've got against a difficulty number. If you roll the maximum on that dice, your dice is strengthed, which means your trait now goes up by 1 level. You now keep the score you've rolled, roll the new dice at the new level, and add it to the score. If you roll maximum on the new dice, strength, it keeps going. Good luck to you. It can keep piling upwards. If you roll a 1, if you completely crap out there, that is a failure. What am I calling a failure? Spamming, yep. So, if you spam, you decrease that trait by 1 level and you gain a demerit. More on demerits later, because this is a beautiful mechanism. Now, if you end up with a final score on rolling of 20 or more, you've taken it too seriously, and you also get a demerit. And I think for... Can you get them for spamming? Excuse me. Yep, no you can't. So, right. So, when you roll your character, you can choose accoutrements from the traits that you have. Some of these are extremely silly, some of them very cool. Now, it's their ridiculous, wonderful interpretation of the Middle Ages. The book is presented very pompously as if this is a true history book, and your adventures are going to be adventures in the true history of Britain, Lord bless it, under our mighty King Arthur. There are a series of 10 adventures in the back, which we'll go through in a bit. But the central conceit is that this is a version of the Middle Ages and on you go. But because this is like the Dark Ages, for instance, there is no single currency. Currencies will vary from place to place where you go, and there are different things. I love this. It could be gold coins, or it could be acorns, or it could be pats of Wizzo butter, or it could be lupins. You have to start collecting lots of different damn things to spend. And you find there is a shop generator, lovely, in the back, which generates not only what trait accoutrements are sold in the shop, but also what the shop is, how it's presented, and most importantly what the shopkeeper is. Because of course, as we know from watching Monty Python, shopkeepers can drive you completely insane. But also you've got to have the right currency for these idiots. So what we've got is this medieval world that they've created. They then do a primer on that medieval world. Now, so chainmail 13th century style, you know, good old Arthur and his knights. They have set up a thing. Yes, the Saxons have invaded. There are, just like Pendragon, there are some remnant Roman towns and civilizations here. There is a legion still here, which consists of 100 guys who still insist that they are a Roman legion, even though they are, you know, the nth to the 10th descendants of that. And, much like Pendragon, they've put in different religions. Now, they have, of course, Christianity in there, but they have variants and breakdowns of it. There is the Pope, and there is an alternative run by the Naughty Pope, etc. There are also things like the Cartoon Church, the Church of Naughty People, many cute little variants. There's also Brianism, which is described as a very small religion, which has somehow also survived, and it is very cultic, because of course it breaks into the cults of the shoes, the sandals, and the gourds. So it's made that little cultural environment for you, and it talks quite well about what the environment's going to be, and they say essentially it's little islands of peace in seas of danger and chaos. You've got the villages and the castles and the settlements surrounded by wild woods, strange women, windswept moors, and you know, places where there are giant monsters attempting to use you as some sort of novelty toothpick. Now, in the back of the rules there is an extensive set of creatures and monsters. So they've got historically accurate persons commonly encountered in medieval England. So it's got your brigands and your knights and your Roman legionnaires, ne'er-do-wells and peasants and so forth, and it gives you their strengths, their traits, their weaknesses. Likewise, it does monsters. It's got bearded snails. It's got spiny Norman. It's got expected silly monsters. It has the electric penguin, Ralph the Wonder Llama. It has a series of things, some very good takes on mimics and so forth. Inevitably knights you see near our old friend, Banog, killer carts, love it. Kevin and Maurice, I'm just Jack in the Box, killer houses, etc. So it's got the silly Monty Python monsters. And how it breaks these up, in the monsters case, it gives you deeds that you need to defeat them and what will happen as you face them. So these things will sometimes have a list of effects and things that they will cause. Each one is its own little story. The combat system, this is a game without hit points. If you face something and you are using violence, if you're using your combat traits against this thing, then you're fighting it violently, then if you fail, or if it attacks you and you fail to defend, you will take a little bit of death. But likewise, if you're arguing with a shopkeeper and it's going nowhere, you will take a little bit of madness as this guy drives you troppo, which can be recorded on those dice or just ticked off on the character sheet. But many of these things will give you a number of deeds that you need in order to defeat them. These are not necessarily combat deeds. So for instance, where we've got Black Beast of Arg, you'll need 4 deeds to defeat this. But that doesn't mean stand there and swap sword blows with it. You can try and be deceitful with it. You can try and muddle its brain. You can try and find a creative way of using your traits. Whenever you roll traits, you have to tell the story of it. You can't just say, I'm going to roll authority to stop the beast. It's like, no. Tell me how. What are you doing? Tell me how this works. How are you doing this? Because that narrative will also give you the consequences in many ways of failure. And also success. How are you actually trying to face this thing? And they have many, many examples. It's a very lively way of play. The other thing I love about these monsters and so on is that they will have little side charts on them. It will show what this monster wants, what this monster hates, what it fears, and it will sometimes, for some of them, have like a little chart, what its current obsession is, what's it currently doing. So if there's a black knight or something, it's like, okay, well, what he generally wants, what he fears, what he hates, but it'll also have what's he up to at the moment. Is he defending a bridge? Is he on a road trying to joust against all comers? Is he on a mighty quest to do this or that? Has he sworn vengeance against... So, you can create this whole little story about the chap. Medieval Gumbies. And they have like so there's a wonderful array of foes. Oh, just to show you. There's the bearded snail. I adore it. Anyway. So, a very playable game there, very lively. But here's where it becomes genius. This is a game where the games master's role is actually a character that you're playing. And this is where it goes radically away from the usual role-playing game. With the Kickstarter came this wonderful DM's screen, and it is a truly glorious piece of work. But what you get with this, most importantly, are these. These are different heads of programming. I love this thing. This is the actual DM shield. So you can see we've got a head here. We've got a rolling counter for complaints received. We also have ways of showing that you are ding on the air, so game currently played, and God says shut up. Now then, here are our different heads of entertainment. Each one has a name and an ID, and as you're playing, you see which one of these guys you're actually dealing with. But each of these is a persona. When you start playing the game, you randomly choose who is currently the head of light entertainment. We've got cardinals, we've got stuffy British aristocracy, we have a llama, we have smarmy hosts, we have disapproving right-wingers, we have moral majority people, we have Conservative Party folk. So there's a random chart. Now each of these characters is up there and they have a list of their likes and their dislikes. When characters in the game do things that the head of programming likes, that head of programming rewards it with those merit counters I showed you. When the characters do things that head of light entertainment persona does not like, they're given demerits. The character for the head of department has some characteristics. One of these is the number of demerits a character has to have before it basically gets a bedevilment. It is punished, essentially, or not exactly punished, because here's where some of the fun of the game comes in. When you get enough of these demerits, bang! You roll a d30 on a chart that is specific to each of these personalities. So there's just page after page after page. The game will play differently all the time. And there is a random effect that happens. This might be traits going up and down. This might be the introduction of new side characters, new difficult things. It will vary wildly depending on the character. The things that are inflicted on you by the penguin or the llama are entirely different from what the Conservative MP or the moral majority person or the slightly naughty sort will do. You can use merits that your character has gained to buy off demerits, or you can use those merits to gain advantages on your trait rolls. But whenever those demerits get too high, bang, you roll on these things. Now, one of the things that comes out in these rolls is change a program. And I love this. This is really subversive. You then roll to see what the program has changed to. Suddenly, you are in a completely different program, because remember, the role-playing game is actually a historical reenactment program. Now you're in something else entirely. So the umpire makes his roll, and it might come out a game show, and it will give you a list down of what this game show is about and what it inflicts. So now in the persona of a game show host, it will say, as a slimy game show host, or your characters will lean forward and say, and now, and now on What's Your Plague, we introduce Sir Harry Bevans, Mystic Mike, go through and everything, and our first prize tonight, below to the head, goes to someone, if you can tell me, and it will give you, questions and things to play. They can be suddenly thrown into a nature program. They could be suddenly thrown into a party political broadcast. And we turn first to our Minister of Overseas Development. So, Sir Brian, what would you say is the current state of government housing provision in the United Kingdom today? Now, everyone is going to be judged on how well they play the character they're suddenly handed to. So in that case, well, I'd like to answer this question in two ways, if I might. Firstly, in my normal voice, and secondly, in a sort of high-pitched nasal whine. And as you play into it and actually do your part, you will gain merits for this. This is a great way of getting merits into the merit economy. It's a fairly brief thing, but it does break up the game, but it forces you into these new role-playing situations at the drop of a hat. Bam! Suddenly you're a sports commentator. Well, here we are at Lord's for the 19th day of the Test match, and and some of these people are sports commentators. But it's also used for doing clues in the game. It says push things onwards. So in news tonight, first we're going to look at, later on tonight, we'll be looking at why medieval adventurers simply failed to ask the silver merchant for any clues about murders. However, now we move on to, billiards. Is there a place for billiards in modern society? So, you can push them into, wait, should we be talking to that silver merchant about clues? So it's wonderfully subversive. It keeps throwing you into these different situations that you have to handle. So it's a very lively game. It keeps you hopping, it keeps you thinking. There is a list of 10 different adventures in the back of these quests, and I really like these because the nature of the game, with people coming up with these ways of using their traits to create deeds that overcome obstacles, means that every game is going to play very radically different, and new circumstances, new NPCs. As those demerits come up, new NPCs, new situations, new weirdness is going to come into the game. So they're not normal scenarios. You can't just kind of write A plus B plus D. Oh, here's your battle mate. There's none of that. So what they've done is describe a series of situations and how these are going to affect you. And there's a nice little précis at the front of each of them. It says, to complete this adventure, your player characters are going to need to somehow accomplish the following things. And it will say, 1, you will start out, speaking to the old hermit who will, tell you the clue. 2, well, somehow you're going to have to find your way to Sweden. 3, in dealing with the Swedes, somehow you're going to have to deal with their mighty telephone system and the idiots that run it. 4, the dread forest of mooses. They must somehow navigate the forest of mooses in the hope of finally finding the dread enchantress of whatever. So it does lay out a series of things they will have to handle. Of course, they might skip around some of these, but I quite like that structure of, here's the précis of what they have to do, here's the main scenarios they can do, and here's some side things that they might end up accidentally being caught up into. Here's some complications. They're nice little adventures. They're really well done. This is a really good piece of game design. It's kept it funny without demanding that everyone be a comedian, because good comedy comes from creating characters and then applying characters to situations. Trust me, I'm a comedy writer. So you don't have to create something stupid and pointless and wacky, and you don't have to run around being madcap. The comedy will make itself. But it is a good adventure game. You are going to have to come up with ways of solving actual adventures and conundrums, of using traits that you have in inventive ways to overcome some quite inventive foes. The narrative of how you do that, of course, is generating a lot of comedy. There's also that wonderfully subversive idea of the DM being a character. Now, those different personae that the DM can have, they change. That counter that I showed you of different complaint letters that come in. The opposite side, by the way. Whee! Complaint letters come in. Sometimes those are generated by that roll in the demerits chart. But players can also become terribly insulted, in which case they can sit down and actually physically write out a letter. Dear sir, I wish to object to the constant reappearance of stock characters in what's supposed to be a role-playing game. I am tired of endlessly... Dear sir, I wish to object about to the antagonist in the previous scene simply falling out of a window, ending the whole thing. I myself have lived in castles all my life and have never once... etc. Dear sir, I wish to complain about the number of complaints letters appearing in this game. When a number of complaint letters come in equal to the number of complaint letters required to get rid of that head of department, he's tossed and a new one comes in and is randomized in. But this one will have whole new things that they reward, whole new things that they punish, whole new quirks of their own, such as the penguin that mostly is concerned with fish and mostly communicates through squawks, and they've got their own bedazzlement charts at the back there. So each one has unique things that happen as you get those demerit points up. So again, it'll just keep you constantly rolling. No two games are ever going to play the same, because they're always going to have this switch out of the personalities that the umpire is actually playing. I love it. So look, in short, this is a beautiful game. It does supreme justice to the original material. Like I said, I know all of the Python material, chapter and verse, every record, every stage show. They have drawn on all of this. They have drawn on records, the books, the presentation in the books. If you have a look at things like Monty Python's brand new Paperbock, or Matching Tie and Handkerchief and these sorts of things, they've kept that kind of presentation, coffee rings on the pages, different sages. You'll have like sections that are supposed to be medieval notes, and you'll have some idiot writing comments in the side. It's a beautiful homage. It is a celebration of Monty Python's humour. I think it's a celebration that really invites you to take part. It isn't that difficult to play, because as I said, you're not being asked to be a comedian, you're being asked to play a straight character in a world that will generate its own humour and absurdities around you. That creation of the DM as a character, a persona that influences the play, and that can change, is a wonderful idea. So this actually plays with role-playing as a medium, particularly that changing persona of the DMs. That is unique, and that is a truly brilliant idea. If the designers are out there watching, yes, Snoots and I salute you. Well done. And it was a work of love, obviously, and well done. It's a beautiful, beautiful piece of work. Drinks because it's 117 degrees Fahrenheit. So anyway, is this game worth getting? Yes, absolutely. If you are just a collector, get it. It's beautiful to look at. It's hilariously written. It's full of great ideas. If you love Monty Python, yes, get it. You just get it, because it's a beautiful celebration of all of their humour. And if you're a serious role-playing gamer or designer, it's worth taking a look at for the things they've done to make this game run. It's a beautiful piece of game design work. Anyway, I've rambled on long enough about this game. So I can head off. You can actually use these in the game, by the way. Anyway, Snoots and I will hopefully see you around at Games Table somewhere, somewhen. Look after yourselves. It's hard times out there, particularly for marginalised communities. So find joy in your gaming communities. Games are here for you, always. We'll see you somewhere, somewhen. Cheers, everybody. Bye.